Have you ever walked into a place expecting warmth and instead found silence, coldness, and eyes that spoke far louder than any words ever could? Have you ever felt your heart step into a room before your body, full of hope, only to realize, in the very next second, that something was wrong, deeply wrong, and that no one would say it out loud, but you could feel it? Feel it like you were crossing into territory where you clearly weren't welcome? I felt that the day I walked into my own son's house. And that's why, before I tell you everything, I want you to write in the comments where you're listening from, your city, your state, your country, because this story isn't just mine. It belongs to so many people around the world who have been treated like they didn't matter inside their own family. I arrived that day with a full heart, carrying more love than bags. When you're a mother, you always arrive bringing something that comes from deep inside, you know? A mix of care, longing, and quiet expectations. And I had all of that inside me. I wasn't expecting a celebration, exaggerated smiles, or long hugs. I just wanted the basics. I just wanted my son to look at me with the same warmth I always had for him. I wanted to feel that there was still space for me there, in that home that, in some way, was also built with pieces of my effort, my life, my dreams. But before I could even fully step into the living room, I felt something was off. It wasn't an object out of place. It wasn't a mess, nothing physical. It was the air. The air felt heavy. The house seemed full and empty all at once. I still remember the sound of my footsteps and how they echoed in a strange, uncomfortable, almost hostile silence. I looked around and felt the first tightness in my chest, the kind of tightness that doesn't hurt on the outside, but hurts deep within, whispering, "Brace yourself." It's an instinct only those who've lived moments like this understand. That sixth sense women have, especially older women, after years of watching the world, raising children, dealing with all kinds of people. We can feel when something isn't right, even when no one says a word. And truly, no one said anything. Silence was what greeted me, a silence that seemed to speak on its own. I tried to smile, tried to break the ice, tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, but all it took was one sideways look from my daughter-in-law for me to understand that this wasn't going to be an ordinary visit. The way she looked at me, it wasn't surprise, it wasn't joy, it wasn't even neutrality. It was something between impatience and disdain, a look that didn't just want me out of the doorway, it wanted me out of the house. But I took a deep breath. I always have. When you've lived what I've lived, you learn to swallow pebbles before facing mountains. And in that moment, I wanted to believe it was just a bad day, that things might get better, that maybe I was overreacting, because a mother's heart always tries to find excuses to protect the ones she loves, tries to justify the unjustifiable, tries to shield even those who don't deserve it. So I kept walking through that living room with a knot in my chest, trying to hold my posture, trying to fit into an environment where I no longer knew if I was welcome. I remember the first thing she said to me that day. It wasn't what she said. It was the way she said it. Short, dry, irritated. The tone of someone speaking to a person who's already a bother, simply for existing. Every syllable carried something that didn't need to be spoken aloud to hurt. I felt my face heat up, my hands go cold. That kind of sensation that shows up when someone diminishes you without raising their voice. The kind of wound that opens through silence and contempt, not yelling. And in that instant, I knew that visit would be different. That day would be different. And that I would leave carrying something heavy inside me. As she talked, the room felt smaller. The house seemed to shrink. The furniture felt taller, the walls closer. It was as if I'd lost a few inches of height without noticing. But even then, I tried to stay composed, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I've learned throughout life that there are humiliations you only overcome by staying on your feet, even when your soul wants to fall to the floor and cry. And it was in that suffocating atmosphere that my son appeared in the hallway. He didn't rush in. He didn't smile. He didn't hug me the way he used to when he was younger. He simply showed up, as if he were part of that strange silence that was already consuming me. In that moment, my heart jumped, because there's a part of us that always believes our children will be our safe place, the shelter we find when the world hurts us. But I didn't yet know that what he would do that day would scar my soul. I only felt that his presence could change everything. And I waited. I waited for a word, a gesture, a smile, anything that would show me I wasn't alone. But before he could say a thing, my daughter-in-law spoke again, and the way she did it, I swear, it was like a heavy door slammed shut inside me. Her tone cut through the air, and I felt I was about to live one of those moments you never forget, no matter how many years pass. It was right there, in that instant, that I understood something was deeply wrong. And the worst part was, no one there seemed to care about what I was feeling. No one seemed to notice what was happening. Or maybe they did, and chose to ignore it. I stood still, trying to hold myself together, trying not to crumble, trying not to show the pain tightening my chest. Because in that moment, I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me fragile. But inside, something was already trembling, and as she kept talking, every word fell on me like a stone I carried alone, a stone no one there seemed willing to lift from my hands, and you, listening to me now. I know many people have lived something similar. I know many women, especially mature women, Black women, mothers, grandmothers who've given their entire lives to others, have gone through moments like this. Moments when you realize the respect you planted never grew back. Moments when your child's home stops being a refuge and becomes dangerous ground. Moments when you discover that love doesn't always come with gratitude. So I'll say it again. Write in the comments where you're watching from, city, state, country. Because this story crosses borders. This story happens anywhere someone underestimates the heart of a woman who has lived long enough to know exactly when she's being diminished. And what happened next? Oh, what happened next was the kind of thing that changes the course of a lifetime. The kind of moment you never expect from someone you raised with your own hands. I still remember the sensation of the ground shifting under my feet, as if the world were about to show its harshest face. But I'll tell you that part carefully, because before we reach the moment that truly wounded my soul, you need to understand what was happening inside that house. The atmosphere, her stare, his silence, and the way I struggled to breathe between one sentence and the next. And it all started with that arrival. That first step into the living room, that moment when I sensed, without knowing, that I was entering an emotional battlefield I wouldn't leave unscathed. And that's why I need to tell you exactly how everything unfolded. Because when the truth finally came, it didn't come gently. It came like a blow to the chest. One of those that echoes for a long time. And believe me, there's still so much you need to hear about that day. Because what my son did, well, that's something you need to hear with your own ears. I was still standing there, trying to understand that growing silence swallowing the room, when I realized her words always came wrapped in a thin layer of politeness, that fake, practiced politeness that never fools a woman who's lived long enough to read the intentions behind people's eyes. She spoke with a smile, but the smile never reached her eyes. Her sentences sounded soft, but the intention behind them cut like a blade. It was as if every word she chose was calibrated to diminish me without giving anyone the chance to accuse her of anything directly. And that's what hurts the most, the kind of humiliation that doesn't scream, but wounds, the kind that arrives dressed as good manners. She made a comment about my clothes. It wasn't direct, it wasn't explicit. It was one of those disguised critiques wrapped in a backwards compliment, the kind of line that pretends to be innocent but carries poison between the words. Wow, you're really dressed up today. I almost didn't recognize you. The way she said, I almost didn't recognize you, was enough for me to understand what she really meant. It wasn't a compliment. It was a provocation, a reminder that, to her, I was someone who shouldn't take up any space there, especially not a space that drew attention. It was the first emotional stab of the day, delivered with the tip of the fingers, like someone adjusting a flower in a vase while pushing the thorn deeper into your skin. And the worst part is that my son heard it. He was right there, just a few steps away, and heard everything. But he stayed silent. He didn't lift his eyes. He didn't shift his posture. He didn't defend me. It's hard to explain the kind of pain that grows when you realize the very person you brought into the world allows someone to disrespect you like that. It feels like your soul shrinks. The pain isn't just from the humiliation itself. It's from the one who witnesses it and chooses to do nothing. I tried to ignore it, took a deep breath, pretended it wasn't about me, the way so many women my age do when peace feels more valuable than a response. But it stayed inside me, throbbing, because words may feel light to the one who throws them, but they weigh tons on the one who receives them. And I knew there was more coming. There always is. People like her never stop at the first jab. She kept going. When people speak, there's always a moment when their tone reveals their intention, and her tone always seemed to get sharper. She looked at me as if she were scanning every inch, searching for flaws, and she found them, or invented them. What mattered to her was making me feel small. She commented on my hair, commented on my purse, whispering that it was a bit too big for such a short visit. She even commented on the way I sat on the couch, as if everything about me was outside the standards she considered acceptable. And with each disguised critique, the room felt tighter, the air heavier, my son's silence heavier, and my desire to stay there shrank, inch by inch. I know many women listening to me now have lived through this, that feeling of being judged, simply for existing. You've felt the cutting stare of a daughter-in-law who doesn't bother to hide the fact that she tolerates you only because she has to. You've heard venomous comments hidden behind polite faces. So if you've gone through something like this, write in the comments, "I know how it hurts." Not because I need to know, but because other women reading it will realize they're not alone. And that unity, that quiet strength among us, makes all the difference. While she threw those little darts, I tried to hold myself together inside. We really try not to react, not to ruin the atmosphere, not to seem rude, not to give them anything to talk about. We hold ourselves together because we don't want to create conflict in our own child's home. But holding it in doesn't mean not feeling it. Every word she threw landed inside me like a drop of acid. It made no sound, but it burned. I watched my son, the way he avoided eye contact, the way he pressed his lips together, pretending not to notice anything, the way he changed the subject too fast. Everything about him screamed that he did notice, that he did know what was happening. But choosing to do nothing is still a choice, and that choice of his was beginning to hurt me more than anything his wife said. My daughter-in-law walked around the house with that posture of someone who commands everything, and every time she passed by me, she would drop a comment under her breath, as if she were just thinking out loud. But she wasn't. It was aimed. It was calculated. It was meant to sting. She told me I should rest because people your age get tired easily. She said I looked so old-fashioned for believing some things still worked the way they used to. She said I talked too loudly for such a small place. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. That cold tone, heavy, making it clear I wasn't welcome. And there I was, trying to keep a smile, trying to keep my grace, trying to keep my emotional balance. Because the worst part of being humiliated inside your own child's home is knowing that if you respond, you become the villain. You become the difficult mother-in-law. You become the bitter woman. You become exactly what they want to accuse you of being. So you breathe, swallow it, hold it, hope it passes. But that day, nothing passed, nothing eased. It felt like each second pushed me closer to an emotional cliff. And I knew that if anything else happened, I wouldn't be able to hide what I was feeling anymore. I walked to the kitchen to get a glass of water and breathe away from her. But she followed me. I don't know if it was coincidence or intention, but she came right behind me. And there, in that kitchen, with the sound of the clock marking the rhythm of my anxiety, everything began to get worse. She opened the cabinet door and, without even looking at me, said some things were out of place because some people like to touch what they shouldn't. It was a direct jab, so clear it felt like a stone thrown straight at me. I felt my heart race, felt my hands tremble, felt that kind of pain we hide behind a weak smile. But I said nothing. I just breathed and let her keep going. Because I knew what was coming next wouldn't be light. If you're still here listening, write in the comments, "I'm here with you." It keeps the video alive, keeps hearts open, keeps this community strong. A community sharing a story that isn't just mine. It belongs to many. And it was there, in that tight kitchen, with the harsh light shining on the cold steel of the sink, that she dropped another polite phrase designed to cut. She said something about the kind of mother who raises children to be too dependent, as if hinting I hadn't done a good job. And that felt like someone pulling something out from deep inside me. But I still didn't know the worst was coming. I didn't know what my son would do. I didn't know that that day, the pain would come from two directions, from the woman he chose and from him. And right there, in that kitchen, while she spoke and I tried not to break, I realized this wasn't just a bad day. It was a sign, a warning, an alert that something much bigger was about to happen. And I felt, deep in my chest, that this wouldn't end well. And that's why you need to stay with me. Because what happened right after marked my soul in a way that still hurts to remember. And that part is still coming. When she closed the kitchen door behind us, the sharp click of the latch sounded like a silent warning. The whole house felt like it stayed on the other side. And there, in that cramped little space, it felt like the whole world had shrunk down to just her and me. The white light above the sink reflected off the metal, creating that harsh glare that hits your eyes and makes everything feel colder than it really is. And it was in that hard, unwelcoming space that her mask finally dropped. She didn't wait a second. As if she had been waiting for the chance to catch me alone, she turned to me with a look I'll never forget. A look that told me everything she truly thought of me. A look with no effort at politeness, no veneer, no filter, pure disdain, pure irritation, pure pent-up resentment. And her voice came right after, louder than necessary, firmer than before, crueler than I ever imagined someone could be inside the very home where I was supposed to be a welcomed guest. She spoke as if she were opening the dirty drawers of her soul. She said I showed up too often, that I had that annoying habit of wanting to help, that my presence left the house emotionally disorganized. Words she threw like stones, careless of the impact, or maybe very aware of it, because only someone who truly wants to hurt chooses every sentence that precisely. And each one of her sentences felt like it was tearing a piece out of me from the inside. I felt as if the floor were slipping away beneath my feet, as if the air grew heavier by the second. She raised her voice even more. She called me an outdated old woman, said my opinions were ancient, and that I needed to learn to stay in my place. And in that moment, when she said that last line, I swear I felt something inside me tear. It's a feeling that's hard to explain with simple words. It's like your soul shrinks, trying to protect itself, but finds nowhere to hide. The kitchen felt too small for the size of the pain she was trying to inflict. On me. I stood there, staring at the sink, trying to understand how someone could speak that way to a person who had never done anything to hurt them. I had always treated that girl well, always welcomed her, always respected her, never asked for anything, never demanded anything. All I wanted was a place in my son's life. All I wanted was for her to understand that I wasn't there to compete with anyone. But she treated me like a burden, as if my existence were an inconvenience she had to put up with. If you, listening now, have ever gone through something like this, or felt someone try to shrink you in this exact way, write in the comments, I felt that too. That simple sentence can reach another woman who's listening and make her realize she's not alone, that this kind of pain is far more common than it should be. She kept going, as if unloading years of frustration that had nothing to do with me. She called my presence intrusive. She said I made my son feel divided, as if that were my fault. The truth is, people like her always need someone to blame for their own insecurities, and often that blame falls on the person who least deserves it. She saw me as a threat, not because of anything I did, but because a mother's love threatens those who don't know how to handle deep roots. And there, alone with her, I felt every word slice through my skin as if it were made of glass. It cut slowly, but it cut deep. It's strange how some kinds of pain make no sound, but leave destruction behind. I wanted to answer. I wanted to show my dignity. I wanted to protect my heart. But it's hard to react when everything happens so fast and hits so unexpectedly. And maybe you, listening to me now, understand exactly what I mean. Sometimes, it's not that we don't know what to say. It's that the pain arrives so fiercely that the words hide inside us. She stepped closer to the sink, turned her body as if she wanted to take up more space than she needed, and said something that echoes in my mind even today. She told me I wasn't a priority in anyone's life there anymore. She said it looking straight at me, with that tight mouth, that cold stare, that arrogant certainty of someone who believes they hold all the power. My legs weakened. My breath caught halfway in my chest. I tried to swallow the pain, but it stayed there, burning like a hot stone. And I thought of my son, thought of the little boy I carried in my arms, the boy I stayed up with on sleepless nights, the boy I protected from everything I could. I wondered if he knew his wife spoke to me like this when he wasn't around. I wondered if he ever imagined that I, his mother, would be treated this way inside his home. And that silent question cut deeper than anything she had said, because pain caused by an outsider hurts. But pain caused by your own blood is something entirely different. It's deeper. It's humiliating. It's something you don't forget. She wasn't done. She looked me up and down with that examining, judging, comparing stare and said I needed to understand my place. She repeated that phrase more than once, as if it were her favorite song of the day. And as she said it, I noticed something unsettling. She seemed pleased, as if she were finally releasing everything she'd kept bottled up, as if she were unloading some old resentment I never knew existed. I started to feel like my body was there, but my mind was trying to escape. The kitchen felt smaller with every word, the air thicker. It felt like I was trapped, and the only thing I could do was fight not to break down right there in front of her. I didn't want to give her that satisfaction. I didn't want her to see the tear forming at the corner of my eye. I held myself with everything I had. If you're still here with me in this story, write in the comments, I'm standing with you. Because this part is heavy, it's real, and it's lived by so many women who give love and receive contempt in return. And when another woman sees that comment, she'll understand she's not going through this alone. And right at that moment, when I was holding back tears, trying to keep my dignity, trying to control the tremor climbing up my arms, something happened at the kitchen door, something that made my heart lose its rhythm for a few seconds, something I knew would change the course of that entire day. But that I still need to tell you carefully, because before I get to what happened next, you need to understand the weight of those words, how they echoed inside me, how they opened wounds I didn't even know were still there. And it's important you stay with me, because what happened in the minutes that followed left a mark I still carry today. And this story is far from over. And it was exactly then, while she poured on me all the words I never imagined hearing inside my own son's house, that I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. Slow, but firm. Footsteps I would recognize anywhere in the world. The kind of sound a mother identifies without needing to turn her head. And when I heard them, part of my heart reacted instinctively, wanting to run toward him, as if that sound alone could save me from the pain I was feeling. But at the same time, another part of me froze, waiting, fearing, trying to brace itself for what might happen next. I turned my head slowly, as if every movement were heavy, and saw my son standing in the kitchen doorway. I don't know how long he had been there, or whether he heard everything, or just part of it. But what I saw first wasn't his clothes, or the way he leaned against the doorframe. What I saw were his eyes. He was looking straight at me, and in that moment, something inside my chest trembled. It was as if, for a second, nothing else existed. Not the kitchen, not the silence, not the cruel words I had just heard. Only that look. A look I had known since the day he was born. A look that always sought mine, always recognized me, always found comfort in my eyes. But this time, there was something different, something I couldn't identify right away, but that pierced me like ice. I expected many things from that look. I expected worry, outrage, shock, even anger, but anger for how I was being treated. I expected him to step forward, to say something, to call me Mom, to put himself between me and her, to do anything that showed I still mattered in his life. Anything, any word, any sign. But he said nothing. He just stood there, still, as if deciding which side he belonged to. And that hesitation alone already started to wound me. His silence was heavy, so heavy it filled the entire kitchen. And the worst part was that my daughter-in-law realized it faster than I did. She turned toward him with the same expression she had used when speaking to me, except now her eyes carried pride. Pride in being caught humiliating someone and yet feeling no shame at all. I watched them as if I were witnessing a scene outside of my own life, as if I were a stranger in that space. It felt like I had been pushed out of my own story, watching it unfold without the strength to intervene. My son let out a slow breath, the kind that doesn't say anything, but says everything at the same time. I didn't know what it meant, and for a moment, I thought he might turn on her, tell her to stop, ask for respect, defend his mother, the woman who did so much for him, who stood by him through his worst and best moments. But he didn't. He didn't even start to. He simply looked away, as if he couldn't bear to face the pain he knew he was already causing. And that avoidance hurt more than anything she had said. I felt my entire body go cold inside. My mouth went dry. My soul felt heavy. And I realized that this was a kind of silence that doesn't hurt only in the moment. It hurts for years. It hurts for decades. It hurts because it reveals truths we don't want to see. It exposes priorities. It exposes absences. It exposes choices. And my son's silence in that moment was a choice as loud as a scream, a choice that said, I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to defend you. I'm not stepping into this. If you've ever felt the silence of someone you love cut deeper than any cruel word, write in the comments, I felt the silence. It helps others understand that this pain is real, that it exists, that it leaves scars. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no sound came out. It was as if the humiliation had lodged itself in my throat, blocking any words from escaping. And he just stood there, quiet, looking at her, then at me, then back at the floor. And the more he looked away, the more I understood that the pain of that moment didn't come only from what I had heard. It came from what I didn't hear, from what I expected and didn't receive. And then she did something that still hurts to remember. My daughter-in-law took advantage of his silence, of his paralysis, to do something that revealed everything. She smiled, not a smile of happiness, not a polite smile. It was a smile of victory, a smile from someone who knew she held the upper hand, someone who knew my son wouldn't protect me, someone who knew that in that emotional battle, I was the only one losing. She stepped closer to him, as if seeking support, and placed her hand on his arm. It looked rehearsed, like she was staking her claim, like she was showing me that in that space I was not a priority. And my son accepted it. He didn't pull his arm away. He didn't say anything. He didn't question it. He simply accepted it. And in that moment, I felt a kind of pain I can't describe with simple words. It's the pain of realizing that the love you gave for so many years didn't come back with the same weight. The pain of realizing you're alone, even when you're surrounded by people. The pain of understanding that inside your own son's home, you can be treated like an intruder, and that sometimes the very person who should defend you is the one who chooses to remain silent. I wanted to tell him I was hurt. I wanted to ask why he was letting that happen. I wanted to ask him to look at me, really look at me, really see me, really hear me. But nothing came out. And even if I had spoken, I'm not sure he would have heard me, because at that moment he seemed to hear only his wife's breathing, her discomfort, her presence, her opinion, and that pierced me with a bitterness too heavy to swallow. I was still trying to keep my composure when he finally opened his mouth to speak, and what he said felt like taking an invisible blow, one no one sees, but that leaves deep marks, marks that settle inside you, where no one else can see them. And those marks I still carry. I'll tell you exactly what he said. But before that, stay with me, because this part of the story is still unfolding. What happened after this moment changed everything. It changed the way I saw him, changed my relationship with him, changed the way I saw myself. It changed even the way I hear silence. And that change you need to hear carefully, because it came in the most unexpected way. When he finally opened his mouth, I felt my heart stop for a second. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the kitchen, as if everything inside me had frozen in one suspended moment. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew it would be decisive. I knew his next words would carry a weight I'd carry for a long time, maybe for the rest of my life. And still, I stood there motionless, looking at his face with the kind of hope only a mother can have. That stubborn hope that stays alive, even when everything around it already says it won't work out. I wanted to believe he would defend me. I wanted to believe he would say she was overreacting, that the way she spoke to me was unacceptable, that he respected me, that he loved me, that he would not allow anyone to treat me like that. I wanted to believe he still remembered who I was to him. But when his voice finally came out, that wasn't what he said. He started slowly, speaking softly, as if trying to balance both sides, but the impact was devastating. He didn't look at me while he spoke. He looked at the floor, at the wall, anywhere but at me. And it's astonishing how deeply it hurts when someone avoids your eyes. He said, "Mom, maybe you're taking things the wrong way." Those words entered my chest like a thin blade, silent but tearing. Everything inside. Taking things the wrong way? Me? I was the one being humiliated, diminished, wounded. I was the one who heard every word. I was the one who felt that contempt on my skin and in my soul. I was the one fighting to hold on to my dignity while being hit by emotional blows disguised as politeness. And I was the one taking things the wrong way? That's what he said, and that's what broke me. My daughter-in-law folded her arms as soon as she heard those words. It was as if she were watching the finale of a play she had written herself. The satisfaction on her face was impossible to hide, and I, standing there with my heart bleeding, had to hear my son repeat, "She didn't mean it like that. Sometimes you're too sensitive, Mom." Those words echoed in my mind like a hammer striking the same wound. Too sensitive, as if I were inventing my pain, as if I were creating storms out of breezes, as if I were exaggerating something happening right there in front of him. If you've ever experienced something like this, if someone has ever invalidated your pain, write in the comments, "I know what that feels like," because that's one of the deepest emotional wounds a person can carry, having their truth denied. My son let out another long sigh, the kind that says nothing but reveals everything. But he wasn't tired of what I was going through. He was tired because his wife was uncomfortable, and that became clear when he placed his hand on her shoulder, the kind of gesture that says, "I'm on your side," without speaking a word. That small gesture destroyed a huge part of me, because in that gesture, he made something painfully clear, something I perhaps hadn't wanted to admit. He chose her side, not the side of truth, not the side of fairness, not the side of respect. He chose the side of convenience, the side that required less courage, the side that made less noise. I felt my eyes burn with that kind of sting that starts slowly, but rises fast, pushing tears upward. But I didn't let a single one fall. Not there, not in front of her. I hardened my face even though I didn't want to. I held myself together with everything I had, because I knew that if I cried, she would win, and I would not give her that. Not after everything she had said, not after the way she had treated me. I wanted to show strength, even if inside I was breaking into pieces. My son kept talking, but I couldn't absorb anything else. It was like his voice had drifted far away, even though he was just a few steps from me. He said things like, "Let's avoid conflict. There's no need for this. No one here wants to hurt you." But every sentence contradicted itself. Because while he said no one wanted to hurt me, I was already hurt. While he said there was no conflict, I was living the biggest emotional conflict of my life. While he said things could be resolved calmly, his coldness cut through me like ice. And then he did the thing that truly broke my heart. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He didn't show aggression. But sometimes the greatest abandonment lives in the quietest gestures. He moved closer to his wife, took her hand and said, "Let's drop this. Let's not ruin the day." I felt my legs tremble, not because he held her hand, but because in that moment he made one thing painfully clear. I was the problem. I was the one disrupting the environment. I was the one making things uncomfortable. I was the one who needed to be contained, calmed, managed. And that interpretation, that image, destroys a mother from the inside. His wife squeezed his hand back and gave that restrained smile, the kind of smile people give when they win a war without ever having to fight. A tiny smile filled with triumph. And I, standing there watching them, realized I was completely alone in that kitchen, even with two people right in front of me. And that kind of loneliness in the presence of others, is one of the worst feelings in the world. It's loneliness inside a bond, loneliness inside a family, loneliness inside your own life. If you're still here with me, write in the comments, "I didn't deserve this." Not for me, but for yourself. Because that sentence echoes truths many women have never had the courage to say out loud. When he finally looked at me, his eyes held no affection, no guilt, no uncertainty. They were neutral, eyes that seemed to say, "Don't make this a big deal." And that look felt like a sentence. Because in that look, I understood that even if I explained every detail, every cruel word, nothing would change. I would always be wrong, always exaggerating, always too sensitive, always misinterpreting things, always in the position of the one expected to accept, to swallow, to stay silent. I felt my heart grow so heavy it almost hurt physically. I felt the air get stuck in my chest, and I realized that something inside me was shifting. Something inside me was saying goodbye, not a goodbye to him, but a goodbye to an expectation. A goodbye to the illusion that my son would always be my safe place. A goodbye to the childish belief, which so many mothers still hold, that their children would never hurt them. It wasn't that he didn't love me. I know he does. But in that moment, he chose not to see me. And when someone you love chooses not to see you, it leaves a mark that doesn't fade, a mark that stays, a mark that speaks to you even in silence. And that silence, the one that came right after, was the cruelest of all. He took a step back, still holding his wife's hand, as if protecting her from me, when in reality, I was the one who needed protection. And my daughter-in-law, seeing this, was satisfied enough to turn her head slightly with that air of someone who wins without ever needing to apologize. It was in that moment I realized something much bigger was about to happen, something that would completely change the way I saw my place in that family. And that's exactly what I need to tell you next. Because what happened after that moment was even deeper than you imagine. And to this day, when I remember it, I feel the weight of that choice, that action, that reaction that changed everything. Because from that moment on, nothing was ever the same. That moment when he took a step back was the moment my heart also stepped back, but into a kind of pain I didn't know I was still capable of feeling. And as they stood side by side, as if sealing a silent alliance against anything that came from me, I felt a pressure rise in my chest, a heaviness so strong it felt like it was pulling my shoulders downward. It was as if my whole body were trying to warn me that I needed to leave, that staying there would only deepen the wound. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The words had been lost somewhere between my son's silence and my daughter-in-law's victorious stare. So I took a single step back, small, discreet, almost invisible, and that step echoed inside me like a crack, as if something had broken. Not something physical, not something anyone could see, but something inside, right in the center of the chest, in that place where we keep our oldest certainties and our deepest affections. When I turned my body to leave the kitchen, I felt my legs acting strangely, heavy, as if they had absorbed all the emotional weight of that moment. Each step felt like it required effort, like walking with sandbags tied around my ankles. And at the same time, it felt as if my feet were floating, unsure of where to go, unsure of what to lean on. It was a contradictory feeling, heaviness and emptiness at the same time. The living room looked bigger than it had earlier that day. The path to the door, which once seemed short, now stretched out like a long, silent road filled with memories that hurt just to touch. I could hear my own footsteps. I could hear my breath faltering as it tried to hold steady, and I heard nothing else, nothing, not a single word behind me, no attempt to call me back, no question asking if I was okay, no invitation to stay, no apology, no gesture saying, "Don't go like this." The silence behind me was so overwhelming, it felt like it filled every corner of the house. If you listening to this have ever walked out of a place feeling like you weren't just leaving a space behind, but a piece of yourself, write in the comments, "I felt that weight." These words help heal other women. They unite, they restore. I walked through the living room and every object, every detail I had seen before, looked different now. I glanced at the couch where I had sat so many times, always with my heart full of love, just to be near my son. I looked at the framed photo on the shelf of the two of them smiling like they were the perfect family. I looked at the table I helped pick out years ago. Everything was familiar, but none of it belonged to me anymore. That space, a place I once thought would always feel like an extension of my own home, was no longer somewhere I fit. My daughter-in-law stayed in the kitchen, and my son stood near the hallway, motionless, watching me leave, as if witnessing something unavoidable. He didn't say a word. He didn't take a step. He didn't reach out. He didn't show regret. And even though I had tried to prepare myself for the pain of him not defending me, nothing prepared me for the pain of him not stopping me from walking out. His silence weighed more than any cruel words she had said. I felt my chest burn. It wasn't crying. It was a steady, concentrated pain, like someone placing a cold hand inside me and squeezing tightly. I swallowed hard several times, trying to push down that knot rising into my throat. With each step, I repeated in my mind, "Don't fall apart. Not now. Not here." And maybe you understand that strength we pull from somewhere deep inside, that strength that only appears when breaking down isn't an option, especially not in front of someone who would take satisfaction in seeing it happen. When I reached the door, I noticed my hands were trembling. It wasn't fear. It was a mixture of indignation, sadness, disappointment, wounded love. I put my hand on the doorknob and felt a sharp ache in my palm, as if that simple touch were sending a warning to my heart. It reminded me of all the days I walked into that house full of hope, full of goodwill, full of love. And now I was leaving with empty hands, carrying only a weight. That should never have been mine. The air outside felt different when I opened the door. I don't know if it was the breeze or the quiet outside, or the contrast with the suffocating environment I had just left behind. It felt like the world was breathing while I was struggling to find air. I stepped outside, and the door behind me made a soft, almost imperceptible sound. But inside me, it echoed like the end of an era. I didn't look back. I didn't want to give myself the chance to see my son standing there, allowing me to walk away, hurt like that. I didn't want to witness that silence anymore, that silence that killed me a little at a time. If you felt this moment with me, write in the comments. I would have walked out too. Sentences like this create refuge for other women living the same wound. As I walked toward the gate, I felt my legs begin to weaken. Not physically, emotionally. It was the weight settling into every muscle, every bone, every memory. I thought about everything I had done for him since he was a child, the sleepless nights, the advice, the times I put myself between him and the world to protect him, the moments when he cried in my arms, the times he looked at me like I was the only person he could trust. And now, that silence had torn a piece out of that story. It wasn't just leaving the house, it was leaving a place inside him, a place I thought would always be mine. I stopped for a moment on the way to the gate, not because I didn't want to leave, but because I needed strength to keep going. I was feeling the kind of pain that can't be precisely described, a mix of loneliness, loss, rejection, disappointment, everything together, tearing slowly. But right there, in that moment, something else began to form inside me. Something small, almost unnoticeable, but real. A spark of awareness. That bitter but necessary understanding that sometimes we need to walk away so we aren't destroyed. And carrying that weight that settles in the chest like a burning stone, I took the next steps, not knowing what would happen next, not knowing how I'd handle it, not knowing whether that wound would heal, not knowing if it even could. All I knew was that I had to leave. And each step I took didn't just pull me away from the house, it pulled me away from an illusion I'd held for years. What happened after that is something I still need to tell you, because the impact of that departure echoed in a way I never imagined. And that's why I want you to stay with me, because this story is far from over. It's only reaching its deepest part, and you need to hear it. When I finally got home that night, the silence felt different. It wasn't the usual silence, the kind that comes with the routine of someone who lives alone and is used to hearing only their own footsteps across the floor. It was a heavy silence, dense, almost solid, a silence that sits beside you like a presence. I closed the door gently behind me, as if any louder sound would shatter everything I had been holding together since I left my son's house. And for a moment, I just stood there with my hand on the doorknob, staring at the empty room, trying to understand how a whole house can feel too small when we're suffocating from the inside. I walked slowly to the couch, but it felt like my legs still carried the weight of leaving that place. I sat down, and when my body sank into the cushions, the emotions began rising with more force. There was no one watching me now, no one judging me, no one expecting me to hold myself together. In that space that belonged only to me, the pain found room to spread, and it came like a wave, a silent but powerful wave that starts in the chest, climbs into the throat, and fills the eyes before we even realize it. I rested my hands on my legs, trying to breathe steadily. But every time I closed my eyes, the scene came back in perfect clarity. The kitchen, her voice, his eyes, the silence that hurt more than anything else. It's strange how the body holds on to sensations long after everything is over. I could still feel the heavy air of that kitchen, the bitterness in my mouth, the faint tremor in my fingers. Every detail replayed inside me as if I had walked out of that house seconds earlier. I leaned my head back against the couch and let the memory return in full. Her voice, sharp, loaded with venom. The words she used to tear me down. The outdated old woman. The phrase that hovered in my mind like a mosquito that wouldn't go away. But what truly broke me was the way my son looked at the floor, as if he didn't have the strength or the will to look at me. That didn't just hurt. It opened a wound inside me that no words could ever close. And it was in that quiet night that I realized something you may have realized too. There is no loneliness deeper than the loneliness you feel while loving someone. There is no pain worse than the pain born from someone who should care for you. There is no humiliation sharper than the humiliation that comes from your own blood. If you've lived this, write in the comments. I felt that night. I took several deep breaths, trying to put my thoughts in order, but it was impossible. They came tangled, tripping over each other, tightening like knots. I remembered my daughter-in-law's face as she spoke to me, the confidence she had in her cruelty. I remembered how comfortable she seemed hurting me, as if I were an obstacle she needed to remove. And that made me think of all the times I tried to be kind, welcoming, understanding. I thought of the gifts I brought, the meals I cooked for both of them, the times I tried to be part of their home with grace and respect. And that night, alone on my couch, I realized none of that had ever mattered to her. Not one bit. But there was something even worse, something that hurt more deeply. It was the question my heart kept repeating, even though my mind tried to escape it. Why didn't my son defend me? Why? That question spun inside my head like a storm that wouldn't rest. It wasn't just her attitude that hurt. It was his lack of one. It was his fear of seeing me, his silent cowardice, his absence, delivered not through words, but through stillness, diverted eyes, accepted silence. That question was like an arrow, one that didn't just pierce the skin. It entered the heart, passed through the soul, and made room for other hurts I had been carrying. Without realizing, I sat there, holding my own hands, trying to understand how someone I raised with so much love could pull away from me like that. I tried to find excuses. I tried to think he was pressured, or scared, or being manipulated. But none of those excuses erased what I felt. None of them softened the wound. I stood up from the couch at some point without even noticing, as if my body had decided to move on its own. I walked into the kitchen, turned on the faucet, and let the water fall into the palm of my hand, cold, running between my fingers. It was like I was searching for some kind of sensation to anchor me back into reality, because the pain felt so heavy it almost numbed my senses. But the water brought no relief. It only showed me the reflection of my own trembling hand. The night felt longer than usual. The clock moved, but I couldn't feel the hours passing. It was as if time had gotten stuck in the same room with me, forcing me to revisit every second of that day, like some difficult test I had to endure. Every detail returned, her tone of voice, my son's expression, the feeling of being small, invisible, undervalued. I went back to the couch and sat down again. I placed my feet on the cold floor, hoping it would keep me grounded. The mind travels far at times like this. It searches the past, the present, and the future all at once. I remembered him as a little boy, running through the house, smiling wide, with that innocent trust of someone who knows his mother is always there. I remembered the way he hugged me tight, how he showed me his school papers, how he used to say I was his favorite person in the world. And seeing that past and realizing how distant the present had become, It felt like being hit twice in the same wound. If you understand what it's like to watch someone you love change right in front of you, right in the comments, I saw that happen. That simple, honest sentence can reach another woman listening right now who feels alone. The night went on, but inside me it felt like the clock had stopped at the exact moment my son chose to lower his gaze. I replayed it over and over again, like a cycle, like a movie I couldn't pause, and every time the scene repeated, I felt the same pain in my chest, a deep pain with roots, gripping my thoughts as if reminding me every second that something had broken forever. I tried lying down, but my body found no rest. The bed felt too big, the pillow too cold, the room too silent. And that silence, the same silence that had been my companion for years, became my enemy that night. An enemy that whispered truths I didn't want to hear. I stared at the ceiling, trying to breathe slowly, but my mind kept pulling memories forward, as if testing me. And I relived the moment he avoided my eyes. I relived her hand gripping his arm. I relived her tone. I relived everything. That night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: emotional exhaustion. It wasn't just sadness. It was a fatigue that comes from the heart, a fatigue that comes when you carry too many unreturned expectations for too long. Motherhood is full of joy, but it's also full of sacrifice, and one of those sacrifices is realizing that, at some point, your children make choices that don't include you. Sitting there in the dim light of my room, I realized that scene wouldn't fade easily. I sat at the edge of the bed, held my own hands, and felt something warm drip between my fingers. It wasn't a tear of anger nor of intense sorrow. It was a tear of acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that I had experienced a deep humiliation. Acknowledgement that I had been wounded inside a house where I should have been respected. Acknowledgement that my son wasn't ready to see the pain he caused. Acknowledgement that day I had lost something I didn't even know could be lost. And even with all that, deep inside me, something was still alive. A small but real strength. A strength that told me I needed to keep going. That I needed to find a new balance within myself. That I needed to learn how to live with this pain without letting it destroy me. Because women like me, women who have faced countless battles, injustices, humiliations throughout life, know that the night may be long, but it isn't endless. I closed my eyes and tried to take a deep breath, knowing that night would forever remain in my memory. A night I would never forget. A night that would change many things. A night that would still echo into the days ahead. And that's where the story continues, because what came after that night was the beginning of an even greater shift. And you need to hear it. The next morning arrived with a different kind of light, not because the weather was nicer outside, but because I woke up with a strange feeling inside me. It wasn't just sadness, it was an emptiness mixed with new awareness, as if the pain from the night before had lit up places inside me I had never taken time to look at. I stood up slowly, like my body was still carrying pieces of the emotional storm I had survived. I looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't look to see how tired I seemed. I looked to see who I was after everything that happened. There were marks, yes, marks from silent tears, from insomnia, from disappointment. But there was also strength there, hidden behind tired eyes, a quiet, solid strength, the kind we only find after enduring deep wounds. Women like me, mature women, Black women, women who have carried their families for years, learn early that life demands a lot, but it also gives back strength when we decide to rise. I walked to the kitchen and made my coffee the same way I always had. But as the water heated and the smell filled the room, I felt something different, an inner discomfort, not because of what happened, but because of everything I had swallowed before. Because that night wasn't just about my daughter-in-law or my son's silence. It was about all the times I accepted emotional crumbs, believing that loving meant enduring. It was about every boundary I allowed to be crossed, about every "it's okay" that in truth wasn't okay at all. And standing there with the warm cup in my hands, I realized something that shifted everything inside me. I didn't want to live like that anymore. I didn't want to be the woman who always swallows the pain, who stays quiet so others won't feel uncomfortable, who allows herself to be diminished, judged, dismissed. I didn't want to be the woman who hides behind her love for others while forgetting the love she owes herself. And when that truth rose up inside me, it rose with a strength I didn't expect. I sat at the table, took a deep breath, and let my thoughts settle. It was the first time in a very long time that I truly thought about myself, honestly, without guilt, without the fear of seeming selfish, because we grow up hearing that mothers must take everything, that strong women stay quiet, that older women shouldn't demand respect, that black women must be even stronger. But that kind of strength becomes poison. That kind of strength breaks us, and I didn't want to be strong like that anymore. I wanted to be strong with dignity, not with suffering. If you've had that awakening, that moment when you finally understand you deserve more than the bare minimum, write in the comments, "I choose to value myself." That sentence might save another woman listening right now. As I drank my coffee, other moments came to mind. Old moments, small ones. But now they made sense. The way she always looked at me from above, the way my son avoided certain subjects to keep peace at home, the times I made myself smaller so they would be comfortable, the times I stepped back when I should have stood firm, and I realized something painful but necessary. I had lost parts of myself so they could feel at ease. That realization hit like lightning, because the worst humiliation wasn't what happened yesterday. The worst humiliation was realizing how many small humiliations I had allowed long before that. And do you know when that happens? When we believe that to keep those we love close, we must make ourselves small. But what we tolerate becomes the standard for others. And that morning, I decided I would no longer be anyone's standard for disrespect. I went back to the living room and sat in the same spot where I cried the night before. But this time, I sat differently. I sat tall. I sat present. I sat determined. I sat like someone who remembered her own story. And at that moment, my mind spoke to me as if from deep within. You don't deserve humiliation. You don't deserve silence that wounds. You don't deserve contempt. You don't deserve to be diminished in anyone's life. I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years, a kind of internal rebirth, an old courage, maybe one that never left, but had been. Buried beneath obligations, sacrifices, and the pressure to be everything for everyone. Older women carry so much history that sometimes they forget to carry themselves. And that morning, I decided things would be different. I went to the mirror again, this time not to see the marks, but to see beyond them. I touched my face gently, as if reconnecting with myself. I looked at the woman in the reflection and thought, "You deserve to be loved with respect." And that simple phrase shook something inside me, because it was the first time I said it so clearly and truly believed it. I decided I wouldn't seek an apology. I wouldn't demand explanations. I wouldn't beg for acknowledgement, because dignity isn't asked for, it's asserted. And when we truly choose to value ourselves, the world rearranges around that truth. Relationships that don't serve us fall away. People who don't respect us reveal themselves. And suddenly, solitude stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like protection. I cleaned the living room, organized the house, put things in place, as if rearranging my mind at the same time. Every object in its spot felt like an emotional boundary being drawn. Every movement seemed to say, "I'm here, I exist, I matter." And the more I did that, the more I felt something inside me expand. The pain was still there, of course. It was too fresh to disappear. But for the first time since leaving their house, I could breathe without feeling crushed. Something inside me had begun to shift, something that only happens when we accept our own truth, when we look in the mirror and don't just see a wounded woman, but a woman who's tired of suffering. If you're feeling this as you listen to me, write in the comments, "I deserve respect." It's simple, it's direct, it's the first step for many women. As I walked around my home, I remembered who I was before all the disappointment. I remembered the strength I carried all my life. I remembered everything I survived, everything I overcame, every battle I won without witnesses. I remembered the girl I once was. I remembered the mother I became. I remembered the woman still inside me, strong, whole, resilient, full of dignity. And in that moment, I understood. No one would ever take that from me again. I decided I wouldn't bow to disrespect. I wouldn't accept emotional crumbs. I wouldn't stay silent in the face of hidden humiliation. I would set boundaries. I would protect my heart, not just my son. I would let go of what didn't honor me, and above all, I would rescue myself. And that's how the turning point of my life began. Not with shouting, not with conflict, not with confrontation, but with clarity, with decision, with quiet strength, with a self-love reborn from the ashes of that painful night. And that rebirth was only the beginning. There is still something very important that happened after that, something that completely changed the direction of this story. And that's what I need to tell you next. And that's why today, after everything I've lived through, I see human relationships with a clearer lens. We spend so much time trying to hold on to bonds, trying to keep bridges intact, trying to salvage connections that no longer see us, that sometimes we forget to look at the most important person in the story, ourselves. The respect others refuse to offer often reveals more about them than about us. And that's where life demands maturity, because not every pain comes to destroy us. Sometimes it comes to wake us up. I learned that dignity is non-negotiable, that self-love can't be tucked away in a drawer, that family isn't defined by last names, but by how they treat your heart. And most of all, I learned that there is a silent, powerful freedom in letting people show who they truly are, without excuses, without explanations, without fantasies. Because when someone reveals their true posture, it opens a door for us to choose our own path with more awareness. And I want you to carry this with you today. Don't stay in spaces where your soul shrinks. Don't accept words that crush your spirit. Don't accept silences that erase your worth. You deserve to be treated with respect, with care, with truth. Your story matters. Your presence matters. Your voice matters. Life is made of many chapters, and each one carries a unique lesson. This was just one of them. Strong, deep, necessary. And now, as this video ends, there's another one waiting for you on your screen. It's a brand new story, with a different perspective, a new reflection, another moment to strengthen your heart and expand your mind. Choose one of the videos appearing right now and stay with me, because every experience we share here on the Matriarch Secrets carries a piece of life that can transform your day in a meaningful way. Keep going. There's more wisdom, more strength, and more truth waiting for you in the next video.